What's up, everybody? It's Kevin and Sergey. Welcome you back to the channel for another episode in our Antares lore series.
This episode, we're going to be talking about the Panhuman Concord, one of the vast Imtel races of the Antares Nexus.
The Panhuman Concord first emerges after the 6th collapse during the 7th Age.
And as a quick recap to our previous video on the Antares Ages, Antares history is broken up into ages and collapses. During the 6th collapse, the Isori, who would eventually become the Panhuman Concord, and the Isorians were actually able to develop a technology that allowed them to move near light speed. This allowed them to actually expand into a real space empire and continuously progress their technology despite being disconnected from the Nexus.
And the way that they decided to interconnect this real space empire of planets with huge distances between them is they created one of the most important things in Antares, which is the Integrated Machine Intelligence, or IMTEL, which is basically, yes, a kind of nano-based technology. They talk about it creating nanospheres, which is just like, a crazy network of tiny microscopic machines. And this IMTEL is responsible for creating the Panhuman Concord once they've reconnected to Antares space as a greater whole.
Even though the Panhuman Concord will eventually split into the Isorians and the Concord, in current times it still represents over 25% of all advanced civilizations on the Nexus.
The Panhuman Concord is the most technologically advanced human society in all of the Antares universe, but it's not really fair to call it a human society because it really is a society of human consciousness integrated fully with machine intelligence. And it is a society in which human beings are basically free to pursue anything they want to do in almost like a utopian manner without any you don't have to worry about toiling at work, you don't have to worry about any kind of challenges, and really you don't even have to worry about any kind of responsibilities that you don't want. And so this really frees the citizenry up to do anything they'd like. And it also affords, since the nanosphere completely are integrated into every human body, there's basically no illness either. You're not seeing people dying in the streets because of cancer or any kind of communicable disease. And it results in them living for even 250 years. And if you don't even want to die at that point, they can kind of implant your consciousness into either clone bodies or machine bodies. So it's pretty ridiculous.
Exactly. On top of that, they don't even have to worry about political decisions in the way a normal society would. And this is because their IMTEL is so integrated into their minds that it passively reaps the information there to make decisions based off of what it knows the amalgamation of its citizenry desires. So, they don't have to make a vote. Their vote is already made because the IMTEL knows exactly what they want and what is best for them through their subconscious thoughts.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It talks about in some the short stories. It's when you're tired, a bed slides out of the wall. When you're hungry, your meal just shows up. And if you were in the mood for tacos or hamburgers, it's tacos or hamburgers without you even knowing it, which is ridiculous.
Yeah,
so
exactly. It would create some mild inconveniences. Me and Kevin are talking on our podcast, and I'm like, Kevin, nobody can understand you. And he's like, what are you talking about? As he's munching a hamburger, not even realizing he was eating a hamburger.
I love it. And the whole reason why this is possible is because basically that nanotechnology creates a cloud around every planet. And it is because it's different because when you look at forces like the Freeborn and whatnot, they utilize physical cybernetic attachments as opposed to the nanosphere of the IMTEL, which is kind of just ever present and
completely suffuses
everything.
Every living thing and non-living
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, it's not absolutely perfect because there are several different panhuman morphs that don't necessarily integrate well with the IMTEL technology. Most notably, the Boramites can't be suffused in the same way that normal human morphs are. However, the IMTEL always finds a way, and the Boramites, like Kevin said with the Freeborn, integrate via different I don't know, I'm assuming like pads
Interfaces and
and
whatnot. Yeah,
interfaces, like oh, a normal person would interface with like a computer or something
normal
like that.
citizens like, you have a flip phone, Boromite? You're not even cool. Flip phone.
Bormites
Although
all
I
have
can't even
like
say that because they're
Nokias,
now
like
more advanced. But anyways, that being said, the opposite is also true. There are people who are, or panhuman morphs, that actually interface with the MTEL like more efficiently. And the most notable of the panhuman morphs is the new who, or new human. And the new who are kind of, they're so integrated that the background like multitude of voices from the MTEL is something that's very normal to them. And they can actually directly interact with the nanosphere, unlike more traditional panhumans, by like being able to like, I mean, like they could like restart machines, they could jump your car without even needing anything
they're
at
kind
all.
of, I always imagine it like they're always Professor X in Cerebro. Like that is
Exactly.
their always existence. Yeah.
Oh, because like, whereas like I guess it must be hard for like a normal citizen, but it talks about how like the new who can even use like the nanosphere to like access people's like memories and thoughts and things like that. And so the MTEL kind of utilizes these panhuman morphs, the new who, to be like their kind of like leader cast, or like in different specific roles that they are just kind of better attuned for.
Yeah, specifically it mentions they have some ambassadorial duties when like
absolutely
you need a human touch to actually treat with an alien race.
Absolutely. And there is a cost, unfortunately, for the new who too, though, is that this advantage they experience with the nanosphere is also kind of a disadvantage, because they're very dependent on the MTEL presence, in the sense that like, even if they're like taken out of it, it talks about how they like become like catatonic, and I can't remember the word we learned, but like
they freeze. They just like
their
they can't
muscles
even
don't
move,
even
they
work.
lock up.
Which makes sense, because they kind of like, they can float even, like, so it's like, if you can imagine, if you're someone who is like totally dependent on that technology to even like get around, like it has to be pretty traumatic to be removed from that.
Yeah, it would be like a human being removed from like oxygen.
As we've said, the MTEL kind of permeates each planet, but it's important to note that the way that it kind of remains connected is that when a Concord ship or a world interacts with another ship or another world, their MTELs kind of fuse. The nanospore meet, and what they do is they share data, they share information, and this kind of like updates the MTEL. And the way that they kind of explain this is that each grouping of MTEL, so it's like if you had a planet or like a planetary system, that is its own shard. So it's kind of like a like broken glass, like a shard. It's a shard of a greater piece. And that is how these things are subdivided. And so when we get into the Concord Military, or the Concord Combined Command, C3 for short, it is one of the more important of these independent shards.
This separate military fleet does pretty much everything in Concord society that has to do with military. It pilots fleets, it recruits soldiers, it pretty much does anything you would want it to make a military go. It's also kept separate from the rest of society for two really key reasons. The first of which is that it interacts with foreign MTELs very often, and this can lead to corruption in a way similar to like a computer virus. It happened notably in the San-Kiri Wars, where the San-Kiri corrupted the Isaurian MTEL, but we'll get into all of that a little bit later in a different video. The second reason that it's kept separate from the civilian MTEL is that it spares the civilians the horrors of war. It allows them to live their idyllic lifestyles, sans the memories of having to kill people or be injured in battle.
Like in all other aspects of the MTEL society, the individuals that make up, human or panhuman individuals that make up the military, are also just kind of like selected. If you're a person who is maybe like courageous or has this like overarching sense of duty, you might just find yourself in the military. And it's to the point where it talks about how every recruit really is not surprised and totally like absolutely thrilled to be in the military.
Yeah,
when
they don't
find
even question as to why they might be there. They're just like, yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. But that said, the human element of the military is substantially smaller than in most of the forces in the entire universe, because the Concord really utilizes drones.
Artificial intelligence is really the backbone of the Concord military in like so many different ways. They don't have tanks that are piloted by people. Their tanks are drones. They don't have pretty much any vehicles that are piloted.
Yeah, no, it's all drones.
They're all drones. They have buddy drones that assist their soldiers on the field. The vast majority of their infantry is supported by something called a spotter drone, which feeds them information and allows them to be more accurate when they're firing their weapons. It's really to the point where it's not a human army. It's a machine human army.
And I think it's also important to note that I don't think that they devalue machine intelligence either.
No.
Though. Like, I think that like I think it'd probably be common for someone to like maybe risk themselves just a teensy bit to save like their favorite spotter drone every once in a while, because they technically have like personalities and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like how you would think of like an AI drone in modern society, where we send it to fight in the stead of a human. Because there's a lot of the times human intelligence in those drones. It's not like they're fodder troops.
Like Sergey said, the Concord comprise more than 25% of the advanced worlds in the entire Nexus, and this is kind of like not even something that they really necessarily aimed to do, because the way that the Concord interacts with like the greater universe is kind of subtle. I mean, like I said, the ships themselves that are from Concord worlds carry with them their own shard of a nanosphere, and when they interact with anybody else, those nanosphere kind of immediately either integrate or destroy other nanosphere and share data and kind of like bring things into the fold. So really the Concord routinely invades planets that themselves are very dependent on their own like nanotechnology quite easily, because they just show up and then there's like a system update that completely takes over that new civilization, and they just wake up the next day having been integrated into the Concord, sometimes probably not even realizing it had happened.
This ease with which the Concord integrate with other societies has really given the intelligent societies of the entire Nexus a healthy fear of the Concord, which is completely understandable. Non-Intel societies will go so far as to build sterilization fields around their planets so that the Concord Intel can't get in. They'll station fleets near their gates. They'll destroy any Concord probes that show up. They'll even go so far as to ice their own planets just to ensure that the Concord Intel does not get a foothold in their society.
We got real gangster with that one.
What?
Usually people say glass plants. You're like, they're gonna ice that planet.
Really?
I'm
I've
okay
always
with that.
thought it was ice.
No, it's glass. You glass them.
What can I
you
say,
nuke
Kevin?
them until.
I'm from the streets.
I was gonna say, it was like icing someone means like, yo, I'm gonna put that guy in the morgue.
This fear comes in large part from the fact that the Concord are something of an inevitability. It has been proven over and over again that with enough time, the Concord will integrate you. It's not like you can fight back. They will eventually get to the point where you are part of the Intel.
That said, the Concord still do, in like a more traditional sense, perform tasks like exploration and trade and diplomacy, because the Intel is always seeking to utilize its own resources in the most efficient way possible. If it isn't as efficient, if it would be more efficient to just deal with a society diplomatically with maybe like some new they'll do that rather than just, invade space. So there is instances where other races will utilize people like the Freeborn, who have developed incredibly advanced technology in the form of like scrubbers and sterilizers to kind of be like an intermediary between the Concord and any of the other advanced, non-Intel societies.
The notable exception to this is the Isaurians. The Concord and the Isaurians never interact peacefully because they're just fundamentally incompatible. Their two Intels cannot exist together, and they're both very aware of that and know that at some point in history, only one of them will survive.
And that said, like literally, they even to interact with the Isaurians, they also have to utilize the Freeborn. So it's anytime they want to like talk to them, they have to be like, let's get the Freeborn on the line, because
otherwise
we know how this is going to end.
Cross-corrupting each other immediately. Yeah.
And that basically concludes the information that's provided in the main rulebook as far as storyline with the Concord, in conjunction with all the other stuff that we've kind of talked about, the ages and whatnot. And it just paints this picture of the Concord is a gigantic empire. It is, engaged in warfare across many different fronts. But really, when it comes down to it, it's just this kind of like Sergey labels them as this true neutral society. Yes,
they're very, I think, and this is what draws a lot of people to the Concord, is they're very complex morally. And they seem to be pretty divisive. If you get on Facebook and talk about the Concord, there'll be a very split audience between people that view them as kind of like the Borg, like a really insidious race that wants to just unify everything under its flag. And the other side of that is that, well, yes, they're like the Borg, but they're also really benevolent to their own people.
Yeah.
So are they trying to improve the universe, or are they trying to enslave the universe? It's kind of two sides.
It's really perspective. Yeah.
They're an interesting case study.
Well, and I like it because it's so one of the things that separates Beyond the Gates of Antares from other science fiction settings is it is true sci-fi, but it doesn't focus on being grim dark. In the sense that, and the Concord's a great example of this, because in a lot of other science fiction, Terminator, whatever, the AI, that controls everything is like almost always evil. And it's always like, humans, you are obsolete. But in Gates of Antares, it's like you said, it's very benevolent. I mean, like the societies that fear the Concord and think it's so awful, talk about their loss of individuality, but they don't really talk about the fact that it's like once you're in I'm sure there's plenty of worlds that join willingly because it is an idyllic society. Like 100% if you want to be
post-scarcity.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. If you wanted to be a harpist and just sit there and be like in some kind of like, Greek architecture, like cupola somewhere, you're allowed to, and you don't have to worry about anything. Like you don't have to feel irresponsible. You don't have to do anything because the MTEL is there to use all of its resources in the most efficient way possible to make sure that every single individual within it, including machine sentience, is being taken care of as best as can be. The issue arises, though, is that, using that same logic, there are going to be instances and throughout their whole history where it's like, oh, the Voral are really kicking the crap out of us. We would really use some help. And they're like, oh, well, your planet's a little bit isolated and it's going to cost a lot of resources and lives to come and save you. So we're not,
because they're ultimately logical. Yeah. They will sacrifice for the greater good without even thinking twice about it. And that's what makes it a really interesting faction. There's really no bad guys or good guys in the entire universe. Well, I guess maybe the Voral, but we don't know enough about them to say that. And the Gar are pretty much bad guys. Like the Gar don't really do much good in the universe. But as far as the rest of the factions, they're neither really good nor evil. They're self-interested for the most part, and they have some benevolent tendencies. But ultimately, it's a huge matter of perspective, which I think is really cool.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just because they're the way that it's set up doesn't mean that there's like plenty of stories. The fact that they wrote that the military is separate and that members of the military are going to actually have access to independent thought as opposed to like the normal citizenry means that it's just full of opportunities for stories. And the new Who are a really interesting subcategory, and they also are just like rich with your ability to go, I'm gonna be my own New Who and make up their own little story.
Nothing's cooler than a techno warlock.
Absolutely, but I don't know. But I love the Concord. I wouldn't say it's my favorite faction, but it's definitely one of the more enjoyable to play. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, it's super fun. I think the Concord are evil Borg monsters, and I still play them every once in a while because they're awesome. Let us know what you think about the Concord's kind of morality system. Do you think they're the benevolent
would you live in the Concord?
Yeah, would you choose to live in the Concord, or would you choose to fight them tooth and nail to retain your individuality? I think it's a really fun conversation.
And while you're down in the comments, you should give this video a like if you liked it and you want to help us fight our battle against the algorithm that is ever present. And if you've not subscribed to our channel yet, absolutely subscribe to our channel. We'd love to have you.
If you want to support this channel in the best way panhumanly possible, go ahead and support our Patreon campaign, where you'll gain access to our Patreon exclusive development vlog. And if you want to deck yourself out in our super slick swag, you can hit the spring link right beneath this video. It definitely gives you +1 to armor and probably +2 versus overhead fire. Somebody's gonna get hit by a grenade and sue us.
As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you on the tabletop. That was over the top. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'm totally into it.